All right, so welcome back. Today is marking our day where we're moving on to Module 3, the third major topic of this course, which is SQL, and databases in general. SQL, of course, is the structured query language used to interact with a lot of relational databases, and so, of course, we'll be covering that as we go along, but this includes databases. It includes database design, best practices for it, as well as ultimately you're going to write Java code to programmatically access your databases. I just wanted to remind you, though, everyone, that Plant CS, that's the kind of the cohort system for this course, is going to have its next meetings on Friday. That's tomorrow at 2 p.m. Ryan has one, and then again on Monday at 6 p.m. So if the people who have been attending those have been giving good feedback that it's been helpful to them to make connections, to stay on task. So if you're having trouble in this course, or you're having trouble reaching out to peers for, say, teammates or something like that, then Plant CS may be your solution. So please go ahead and give it a try. More information can, of course, be found on the course Canvas page, as well as Piazza. Okay. So I wanted to motivate this by going back to something that you've already, this is why we give this as our first homework. Let's go ahead and take a look at the data from the video game database, all right? Where we gave it to you as what's called a flat file, right? Now this is a flat file because it's actually the relations between these pieces of data are not flat, right? They're dynamic, that there's a relationship between a game and a publisher, and a game and a platform, and et cetera, et cetera. But it's been flattened with a CSV format. Regardless of whether or not it has a publisher has no games, right? So what did we have to do? Well, we had to leave a blank there, right? And maybe a particular game was never published on any system. So like GTA 3. It was never published on any system that we know of, at least in this piece of data, so we left those blank, the year and the platform blank. There was repetition, right? The Lego Star Wars was published on 4 different platforms. So we had a lot of repetition going on here with Lego Star Wars, and repeating its publisher every single time, and repeating its year every single time, just to get a unique platform. And so it has a lot of drawbacks here. Even if we converted it to, say, JSON, right? Now it's a little bit, it's only slightly better because we now know that each one of these rows looks like this, right? Now over here, I don't think that we included it in the assignment, but of course you could always put say that your first line is your header line, telling you that that the first token is your title, the second token is your publisher, et cetera. With JSON, that's even more repetition because the title is repeated on every single record here. And when you get down to it, an XML format is even more repetition because not only do you have an opening tag and a closing tag, right? So there are advantages of JSON and XML over plain old CSV files. They can provide some validation. For example, this is certainly a number, right? The year is. But otherwise, everything else is a string. Over here, there's little that we can do directly in XML unless we define what's called a schema. A schema is a dictionary basically saying that this particular XML format has this expectation, that everything has a title. That title is a string. Everything has a year, may or may not have a year. That year has to be a number. For things that have not been published, like for example here, then it ends up being blank, right? Equivalently, you could of course just leave those off entirely, and that's an equivalent way of representing something as XML. All of these still fall short though, and they fall short because flat files are insufficient for storing data. There's repetition of data, right? That same year was repeated over and over again. That same publisher was repeated over and over again. There are formatting issues. Again, there's no way for us in CSV to say that this should be a number and only a number. What's to stop somebody from putting in hello, right? There's consistency issues. What if over here in the CSV file, when I repeated a publisher, sometimes I wrote it with a space. Sometimes I wrote it lowercase, all lowercase right here, right? And sometimes I wrote it, Lucas Arts, right? Completely misspelled it. Even though conceptually that's the same publisher all over for all Lego Star Wars, right? It introduced by doing this as a flat file, it introduces the possibility of data anomalies, bad data, right? So there's no way to enforce consistency or integrity. That by using repetition, that introduces a failure point, and that failure point can have consequences. How do I know that these two things are the same publisher anymore? We know because we all know who LucasArts is, or was. I don't think they exist anymore, do they? I'm not sure. And there's also organization problems, right? As you probably experienced in your first assignment, without object-oriented programming, it was kind of a bear to try to produce that report. Maybe you had to iterate over it several times. Maybe you had to come up with an object, and then you had to relate multiple objects together, right? An object to represent a game, an object to represent a publisher. And naturally, you'd want to relate them somehow through composition or something now that we have OOP. But it's not sorted, right? It's in one big giant file. There's no security. There's no way to say that this user can access these records, but that user cannot access those records over there. Or that user, I want to give even more fine-grained permissions. That user can access these records, but only this column in those records, right? There's no way to enforce that kind of security. It's an all-or-nothing thing. There's also no support for multi-threaded applications, right? You basically open the file. Once a file is open, there is a file lock on that file. No other process can come in and change that data. No other process can come in and read that. Potentially, they wouldn't even be able to read that data until that first process is done and releases that file lock. So there's no multi-user capability. There's no multi-threadedness, etc. Right? The solution here, of course, is to use an RDBMS. That is one of many. There we go. That is one of many acronyms that we will have today. RDBMS, a relational database management system, right? Sometimes they take out the B and it's just RDMS because database is not technically two words, right? Some people treat it as two words though, and so, whatever, go ahead. The idea was introduced in 1970 by Edgar Codd. Usually I do not go into the history of things, but this one I will because we've got a nice mnemonic device later on for 1, 2, and 3 normal form when you're designing a database. It goes something like, every record has to depend on the key, the whole key, and nothing but the key, so help me Codd, right? So it's old, right, 1970. And RDBMSs have been around for a long time. He put it together when he was at IBM. So IBM produced the first relational database management systems. The key aspects are that data is stored not in a big giant flat file, but in tables. Right? A table can be thought of basically as one single spreadsheet. It's not a spreadsheet, but that's probably what you're familiar with. A spreadsheet has columns and rows, right? So tables have columns and rows, right? Columns define fields or pieces of data for each record. Right? Rows correspond to a single record. Right? So it's kind of, again, it's kind of like a spreadsheet. One table is kind of like a spreadsheet. A database typically has multiple tables that are related, right? That's where that relation comes in. Data in one table is related in some way to another table. Now you can have tables that aren't related at all in any way, and they're separated out, but it's still a relational database management system, right? Each row, in one particular table, each row may have a unique identifier, right? We call this the primary key, right? Or PK for short. Rows in different tables, right? In other words, rows or records in different tables may be related to each other through what are called foreign keys, or FKs for short. Okay. So we've got the idea that we've got tables, we've got rows in those tables, we've got columns, and we've got relationships between those tables. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and look at a much better representation of our video game data. This is called an ER diagram, an entity relation diagram. Okay? An entity relation diagram is just simply a picture that has each one of these things. We've got 4 tables. A table to represent a publisher, a table to represent a game, a table to represent a platform. This table I'll come back to in a second. It's modeling the fact that a particular game is available on a particular platform. Let's look at these 2 tables first of all, publisher and game. What's the relationship between them, right? So let's go back to our flat file here, and let's see, LucasArts, right? After I correct all my mistakes there. Oops, there we go. All right. Can you tell, well, first of all, can you tell just from looking at all these records, say that there were a million other records after this, can you tell how many games LucasArts published? Not fully, but I can tell you that they are all grouped together here because I'm not going to write it so that I randomize everything. How many games did they actually publish? 1? TIE Fighter and X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. So 3 here, right? Well, wait a second. Did they actually publish 6? No, those are the same games. Right? Lego Star Wars is 1 game. It's a whole series of games, but whatever. So actually, they published 3 games, okay? So one publisher can publish multiple games. We also have publishers here that didn't publish any games. Square Enix here is just a record that there's this publisher that exists, but they haven't published any games according to our database yet, okay? What about the inverse relationship there? One game, now in real life, it could have multiple publishers, right? You could have a game that has had 2 or 3 development houses work on it and then they all publish it together. But for the purposes of this model, what's the relationship? One game, or a game, has 1 publisher. That is modeled through this relationship right here. Do you see this? It's basically a connection between this table and this table over here. This chicken foot here, right, that's going out, extending out like that, that is a many relation. This over here, this is a 1 relation. So it's a 1 to many relation. One publisher can potentially publish multiple games. One game has only 1 publisher. Right? That's a many to 1 relationship. Right? So let me go back to let me go back to the notes here. Right? So foreign keys may define a many to 1 or 1 to many relation. Right? And we'll come back to the details of how that works out. But it's basically the same thing. 1 to many, many to 1. It's just what's your perspective. Are you starting at table A and going to table B, or are you starting at table B and going to table A? 1 to many, many to 1. Right? It also, or foreign keys, may define a many to many relation. Right? Now let's go back over here. So, Lego Star Wars was published on how many platforms? 1, 2, 3, 4. Xbox, PlayStation 2, PC, and Mac. Right? I have no idea if it was actually published on Mac or not. That would be surprising. But 2005, maybe it was. I don't know. But anyway, I don't even know if it was published on PC. Probably, but it's more of a console game, right? So we've got 1 game published on multiple platforms. Is there sense in buying a platform that can only have 1 game? No. So PlayStation 2, for example, has hundreds of titles published on it. I don't know if we've got any in here, but here's another example with NES, and NES. It has 3 games published on it, on the original Nintendo Entertainment System. So what kind of a relationship do we have between a game and a platform? We've got a many-to-many relation here. Now, we can't do that. I mean, there are ways of doing this directly, but they're not advisable. What we've done here is we've created what's called an intermediate join table. This availability table right here, there's a one-to-many relationship to it from the game, and from the platform to the availability, there's a one-to-many relation. Effectively, meaning that between the game and the platform, we have a many-to-many relationship. One game can be published on multiple platforms. One platform can have multiple games, so therefore we have a many-to-many relationship between them. Right? And that is realized through this availability table. Everything has a primary key, like we said before. You see this little graphic right here? I don't know if you can zoom in on it. It's not going to look all that great, but that's a key, right? It's the primary key. It's a way of identifying things. So we've got a publisher ID, we've got a game ID, a platform ID. You see that I'm following a naming convention here where I take the table name and then just append ID to it. Right? Likewise, over here in the availability table, we have an availability ID. This int stands for the fact that it's an integer. Right? It's a number. Generally, you want all your primary keys to be integers. You want all your foreign keys to be integers. Over here in the publisher, we have the name of the publisher, varchar 255. What do you think varchar stands for? 2 words. Var, variable, char, character. It's a variable character field, right? And the 255 is simply just a limit. You can name any publisher up to 255 characters. You go beyond that, we have data truncation. My awesome, super stupendous publisher, blah, 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 and then eventually it cuts off at 255. It is not a C string. You do not need null terminating characters, so you can actually fit 255 in there. Right? You'll see all over the place that 255 is a common number to use, simply because of that history there, that there used to be a null terminating character there. So 256, that's a nice round number as far as binary is concerned, because it only takes 8 bits. Right. All right. Let's see. Remember, if there are any questions, we are online on Piazza here. All right. So what about in the game here? We've got our primary key. We've also got a name, the name of the game, right? And that's 255 characters, up to 255 characters. If you, it's a variable character, so if you only take 10 characters to name your game, it's not wasting the other 240 bytes or 245 bytes. It's only taking as much space as it's doing. The database knows what it's doing. Let it do its job. It's optimized for everything. But here we have a publisher ID. Why would we need that? That's a reference to its parent, right? Who published this game? Well, whoever the publisher was with ID 1234. And all you have to do is go over here to the publisher and see, well, look up publisher 1234. Oh, okay, that was LucasArts. Right? There is a relationship, a parent-child relationship here. I didn't draw it like a parent-child, like a family tree. I drew it horizontally, but you could imagine taking the publisher table and moving it up here, and now you've got a one-to-many relation to its children. The child needs to refer back to its parent because you cannot have orphans. Right? If you define your database correctly, all data referencing other data, that data is guaranteed to exist. If not, then there's a database error, and you wouldn't be able to, say, delete something down here. We'll talk about that momentarily, though. Okay? Over here in the platform table, we have the platform ID and the name. And then, of course, over here in the availability table, to create a join between 2 tables, we need 2 foreign keys. The red here indicates that this is a foreign key. Right? By the way, the filled-in part means that it's a required piece of data. A non-filled-in part means that it's an optional piece of data. And we'll get into all those details when we create our own tables here. But otherwise, I've got the game ID and the platform ID. This game ID is referring back to one parent, its game. This platform ID is referring back to its other parent, the platform. And so it's, I am available. Who am I? I am this game over here, LucasArts, and I am available on that platform over there, PC. Right? When was I published? I also have that piece of data right here in 2005. Okay. So now that we have an understanding of this database, let me go ahead and put it up here, and we'll come back to it. Well, I want to start working with this data. I want to start doing basic CRUD. Right? So what is CRUD? Right. Sorry, let me go back to the notes here. CRUD demonstration. CRUD stands for Create, Retrieve, Update, and Destroy. If you have pieces of data, there are 4 basic operations. You can create pieces of data. Once pieces of data have been created, you can, of course, retrieve them out of the database, because if there's no retrieval, then it's just a black hole that you're putting stuff into and not getting anything out. U stands for update. Once the data is already in, maybe you want to change the data. Finally, destroy or delete. Maybe you want, once the data is in, okay, I no longer need that data, I'm going to go ahead and destroy it. They have a one-to-one correspondence between SQL keywords. Unfortunately, they don't have the same CRUD. Making an acronym, it's ISUD. So ISUD doesn't have the same kind of ring to it, so we call it CRUD instead. But otherwise, create is insert a new record. Retrieve, you are always selecting out records, and that's actually, there's a lot of stuff that you can do with select, so we're going to look at it last. You can update a pre-existing record. You can destroy a record, okay? So let's go ahead and start with the C, right? CRUD of CRUD. Let's go ahead and create some data, okay? Let me give myself some more room here, sorry, so that it pops up all the time. There we go. So creating data involves inserting new records into an existing table. We haven't even talked about how to create tables yet. That'll come when we start designing databases. Right now, I just want to work with an existing database. This database over here. I want to, let me make sure that it's showing up. Okay. I want to find out what games are actually available in my library of games, or whatever this is doing. I've not even played all of these games. I just needed random games one day. You use the insert keyword. All right. Before we get ahead of ourselves, though, if you've been watching the pre-prepared videos, then you're already set up. But if you haven't, then you, of course, need a way to get into your database on CSE. The suggested way is to use MySQL Workbench. Why? Not because it's an awesome program, but because it is free. Right? So MySQL Workbench, it's not free as in free and open source. There might be some alternatives out there. If you find alternatives that you like and that are free, go ahead and share them on Piazza. But otherwise, some people were saying that, that the latest versions don't work on Mac. So download old versions. I have no idea what version I'm using. Let's find out here. You can, so this is 8.0.19. So you know that at least that one works, if you can find that. At least that works on my Mac, and I don't know what my operating system version is right now, but I think it's up to date. But in any case, this is basically an IDE. It's an integrated development environment for SQL. You can write SQL. You can execute SQL connecting to a foreign database. The foreign database that you will be connecting to is your CSE database. To get your CSE login credentials, which are different from your login, right, and for good reason, you will need to go to cse.unl.edu/accounts, log in with your CSE credentials, and go to account settings. And here, I currently have a MySQL account. I'm not going to reset my password. Yours might say that you don't have one yet, but you can generate your password. Your password will be emailed to you. You can then change your password later on if you want to. What I've done here, I've already connected here, so let me go ahead and show you how I did that. I'll go ahead and cancel this. Can I just delete that? Oh, okay, well, I'll just edit the connection to show you what it looks like. All right. Don't touch anything unless you know what you're doing. But otherwise, the host should be cse.unl.edu. Don't touch the port. 3306 is always the MySQL port. Name your connection. I've just named my connection CSE. You can test it if you want. Otherwise, you can store your password if you really want once you've set it. But I'm just going to close this. I don't store my passwords, so I think this is it. Yeah, there we go. So I'm now in my database here. Right? There are lots of things that I could do to get started. For example, I could show tables. Right? What tables are already in my database? There are none. Right? In fact, it's going to error out down here. Anytime you, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to blow this up. I can blow this part up, but the errors down here I can't blow up. You'll see down here, though, if you really zoom in, it's error code 1046, no database selected. Well, I've just connected to the database server. I now need to start using my database. Use cburk. Your database is named after your login, okay? Now, in a real database system where you had full access to everything, you could create databases named whatever you want. But because we're on an educational system downstairs, they've restricted your access. You can only use one database. That database is named after your login, right? If you ever get yourself into trouble and you just need to wipe everything clean, you can. Now, this will delete all of your data and there is no recovery. But you can always drop database, right? Your database. And if you ever do that, then you can go ahead and recreate it. Create database. Oops. And execute that. Now I'll use my database. It's not use database, then the database name. It's just use and then the database name. And you see down here these three check marks, these green check marks. That indicates that those were successful. There is no result returned back from the database because I didn't select anything out of it. I'm just executing commands to the database. Okay? Now you might be wondering, if this is your first time using MySQL Workbench, how did I actually execute those things? Use cburk. All right. I hit, now this is Mac, this is Command Enter to execute whatever your cursor, whatever the current command is, execute that command. You can see that up here if you just want to click something instead of a quick key. Execute the selected portion or everything if there is no selection. Or over here, I think that this is the execute the selected line. Execute the statement under the keyboard cursor. Right? So this is what I just did by hitting Command Enter. You folks on Windows, it might be Control Enter to execute that command. Otherwise, you can select multiple lines if you've got multiple things that you want to execute, and this icon over here will execute them all. Or on Mac, it's going to be Shift Command Enter to execute everything all at once. Periodically, you can of course clear it down here, clear out the command results. But now let's see. Oh, you know what? I think I screwed up because, darn. I think I just deleted all the video game database stuff, didn't I? Oops. I didn't mean to do that on purpose, but I'm glad that I did because it gives me cause to show you. All right, here we go. I'll just open this up. Oh, actually, I'll do it over here. I'll show it over here. You can download this this video game database, I believe, from somewhere on the course page. But here is what that equivalent data looks like once you've SQLized it and you're inserting all these records. So I'm going to go ahead and select everything and put it over here into MySQL Workbench. You'll note here that I put your login because if I gave it to you like that, I would be hearing endless complaints that it doesn't work because I don't have permissions. My password is correct. Well, of course you don't have permissions for my database. You have permissions for your database. So I'm going to select everything. Actually, you don't need to select everything. I'm just going to execute everything all at once. Shift, Command, Enter on Mac. Right? Some things are warnings. Generally, you can ignore those. But otherwise, I get green everywhere, means that everything was successfully installed. Ignore these for a second. We'll come back there. Okay? What data is in there? What tables did I just create? You can show tables. The availability table, game table, platform table, and publisher table, just as I had over here. Okay? Awesome. Now, I actually want to start working with this data. Right? So, create means I'm going to insert a game. Let me go ahead and get rid of that. Anybody have a favorite game that they like? Current game. The what? Madden? Okay. Insert into the database. Insert into, which table am I going to insert into? The game table. Insert into game. Let's see. Yep, there we go. And then the columns, right? And then the values, right? Values. Right? And this is not real SQL yet. Bear with me. Insert into game. All right. Well, I need, technically, do I need 3 columns here? Do I need to say what the game ID is, what the name is, and what the publisher is? I could, right? I could put all 3 of those things in there, in which case I need to name all those columns. So a game ID, what was it, publisher ID, or name, and publisher ID, okay? Let me go ahead and get rid of this so I've got more room. Now, those values correspond to those 3 columns. You'll see here that MySQL Workbench is highlighting keyword syntax, insert into, and then this is not highlighted in blue because it's not a keyword. Unfortunately, name is a keyword, but I'm using it inside as a column name, so it's going to mark it up just because it's not that smart. It's not actually a keyword in this context here. But what values do I want to insert there? Right, well, game ID, and then you said Madden. Right? Madden 2K, what? 21? All right, like that? Okay. And what's the publisher ID? Who published Madden? EA? EA Sports? Sports. Right? So I've got 2 big question marks here. Game ID. Oh, okay. I don't know. Give me a number. Oh, okay. 1. I'll come back to 1, 2, 3, 4 here in a second. All right. Give me a publisher ID. Give me a number. Can I do that? You said that it was published by EA Sports. Do we have an EA Sports here? I don't know. Here's a preview of the R. Let's find out what publishers we actually have. Select everything from publisher. Oops, I think it's lowercase. There. Do you see EA Sports here? Probably not, because I never played an EA Sports game. Not that I've played all these. Yeah, I think these are just games I knew of. Probably I played them all. But I don't see any EA Sports here at all. So what do we need to do? Remember, publisher and game have a parent-child relationship. Can a game exist without its parent? Nope. What do we have to do first? The parent has to exist before the child can exist. So let's back it up here. And let's insert a publisher record instead. Insert into publisher. And it's just over here to the right if we want to zoom in. I need a publisher ID and a name. A publisher ID and a name. Generally, white space doesn't matter. I will go ahead and put in white space here just because it looks nicer. Publisher and name. Values. Now what publisher ID should I use here? Oh, maybe 1. Right? Can I use 1? 1 is already taken by LucasArts. Let's find out what happens when I try to do that. And you said EA Sports, like that? Good enough, all right. Let's go ahead and try to, no. It's complaining about this second line, that's fine. I'm only going to execute this first line right here. Insert into publisher values, and you can, again, white space doesn't matter, so if you want to keep it small, you can always go to the next line, right? Note here, though, that lines are ended with a semicolon. Sounds familiar to me, right? Insert into publisher failed. I got a little red X here. Why did it fail? Let me go ahead and go over here to this response. Duplicate entry 1 for primary. Right? What did we say before? Select everything from publisher. There's already a publisher, LucasArts, with that primary key right there. You cannot have duplicate keys, right? That's the whole point of a key. A key is guaranteed to be unique. So I can't use 1. I can't use 2. I can't use blah, 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 blah. What can I use? I could use 14, right? Because that's the next available spot. Right? Except that means that every time I do this, I'm going to have to go and find out, is this key already being used? If not, okay, go ahead and use, 14 is the next one. Go ahead and use that, right? Uh-oh, another thread, another user came in because it's multi-user, right? And already, and inserted a record at 14. Between me checking, is 14 available? Yes, it is. Okay, I'll go ahead and, oh, somebody grabbed it already, right? Key management is a very, very difficult problem because it requires a lot of synchronization. Let the database do its work for you. Right? You can do something like this, but should you? In some instances, you should. In fact, I did over here in these because I wanted predictability. I said, I want these keys to correspond to Capcom so that down here, when I use those keys, say that Tomb Raider was published by publisher 10, which is Eidos, right? I wanted that predictability. So I chose my keys, which was fine because this is the initial data, right? This is how I'm initially populating the database. As long as you know that those keys are available, those key values are available, then you're good to go. But if you don't, then don't do that. Let the database generate it for you. So so this one, insert a publisher record using the key, the hard-coded key, primary key value, 14, versus let the database do its job. Let the database determine the next available key value. Right? And to do that, all I need to do is leave off publisher ID. And EA Sports is the only value that I give it. I will go ahead and execute this. And you see that it worked. There's a green check mark now. Let's go ahead and look at the publishers now from publisher. Oops. And you see this new record down here, EA Sports, with a publisher ID of 14 because that was the next available spot. Now, the database is smart. 14, 15, 16, 17. Uh-oh, 14 got deleted. It doesn't go back to 14 and reuse that. It just keeps going. That would be very expensive to always go through and see which keys are still available, right? It's only ever keeping, usually the way that a database works is it's keeping a counter and saying, okay, well, key 14 is the next one. So next time somebody asks me for a key, I'll give that out. I'll increment it. Next time somebody asks me for a key, I'll give out 15, 16, 17. It will eventually wrap around and then start using key values that are available, but let it do its work, right? It's very efficient at doing it. Another item that I've just introduced without talking about is what? Comments, right? And you probably saw the comments over here as well. There are two styles of comments. Comments generally, though, are either a hash or I think it's actually more universal. I should have done it this way. It's more universal to use hyphen hyphen. Right? There we go. And that's what I should be consistent. And I'll use that here. Okay. So let the database determine the next available key value. Now that we've got that, we can go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the notes so that you can see it. And when I push these out later on, right? And you see that with the markdown here, it's marking it up just like it's SQL, just with magenta instead of blue, right? Yay! All right. So now I know that that publisher is in there, and I can use it over here as 14. All right. Let's try that. It failed. Duplicate key entry 1 for primary. What should I not have done? I should not have determined the primary key for the game. I'll let it do its job. Okay? So insert a game record referencing the inserted EA Sports record. But you know what? That still required me to look up EA Sports got inserted. How did it get inserted? Well, it got the key 14, right? There's another way that you can do it, though. You can insert a record, game record, and refer to EA Sports using a nested query. All right, so I'm going to show that to you now. Insert into game. In fact, I'm just going to grab this stuff because it's exactly the same. There we go. Values. Madden 22. So that we can distinguish between these two things. And now I need a publisher ID. What publisher ID is EA Sports? Well, what I can do is I can make another query. Select publisher ID from publisher, where name is equal to, what do we call EA Sports? Is that how we spelled it? In general, unless you've got a crappy configuration, I don't think CSE has a crappy configuration anymore. Everything is case sensitive, right? So you can go ahead and insert Madden 22. Did I execute this? I forget. No, I didn't. All right, we'll go ahead and execute that. One row affected, the first one up here. I inserted that, and then we'll get a pre-order preview of Madden 22. Right there. Now let me look at all the games that we have. Select everything from game. Again, you're getting a preview of select statements, retrieve statements. That's okay. Right? We'll talk about those in detail later on. There's Madden 21. There's Madden 22. And by sheer coincidence, I didn't mean for there to be exactly 20 games in there. That only works out this year, I guess, because if I use the same database next year, we'll be off by one. But Madden 21 and Madden 22 both have a publisher ID of 14. We didn't have to work at it, right? Here's another trick that you can use. Preview. If you ever want to change data, I'll show you how to do that in a moment here. But if you ever want to do it with, say, MySQL Workbench, you can do it directly, right? And then you can commit changes. I think that this is save. This disk up here is save. Export. Nope, that's an external file. Where is it? Edit. Edit current row. I already did. How do I commit that change? Oh, apply. There's an apply button down here. We'll go ahead and apply that change. It tells you what SQL it's about to generate. You hit apply, and it does it for you. Close that, and now let's select everything from the game again, and you can see that the preview has been changed. Right? So you can use this as an IDE to just change things directly. It looks kind of like an Excel file, right? Because you got tables, you got columns, and you got rows. You can close a tab here if you no longer care about it, like that. The tab titles are at the bottom. Kind of counterintuitive, but so be it. Right? All right, I'll go ahead and make sure that you've got those in the notes as well. Right? And correct my comments. There we go. So it's okay if you use hash. I think hash is supported by CSE, but it's more universal, I believe, if you use hyphen hyphen. Sometimes you'll see people use a combination, hyphen hyphen hash or hash hyphen hyphen, right? I'll leave it like hyphen hyphen. That's comments. Sometimes you can do multi-line comments in a C-style syntax. So this is a multi-line comment. Right. Some variants of SQL do support that. I don't think that that's universal though. Right. All right. So that's create. Right. Again, we'll come back to retrieve when we have a little bit more substantial stuff here. Otherwise, update and destroy are super easy. Let me go ahead and update something. In fact, I'll update that. It's no longer a preview. Madden, it's 2022, and it's no longer in preview, so we'll go ahead and correct that mistake. Select everything from game. Remember that it's still that way because I saved it. Right, preview. Let's go ahead and switch it back now to what it was originally. I will update. Right, this is CRUD, update. Right, that's the one keyword that actually matches. Update game, set name equal to Madden 22 without the preview. Right? Okay. Now, without any other qualifications, what do you think that this does? And by the way, Madden 22, what am I using to represent a string here? Double quotes. You can also do single quotes if you want to, but you have to be consistent about it, right? I like double quotes, so I'm going to go ahead and go with that, right? Whatever you want to do, but you got to be consistent about it. What am I about to do here? Let me clear out all the results. Get rid of this for a second. And let me actually try to execute this. It's not even going to let me do this. That's very, very dangerous. You are using safe update mode, and you tried to update a table without a where clause. Right? What do you think that this would do? Update game. Update the table. Set the name column equal to Madden 22. Did I specify which game I wanted to change? Nope. They would all be Madden 22 if it allowed me to do something like this. I'm using safe mode, and that's the default. You can turn off safe mode. I'm not even going to show you how to do it, though, because it's not a good idea. You can turn off safe mode, and yeah, now all your games are named Madden 22. By the way, am I spelling Madden correctly? Oh, no. Thank you. All right, well, let's correct it. What is it? Oh, Ian? Okay. All right, there. Now they'd all be Madden 22, right? That's not going to work, right? I only want to update one specific game. I want to update this game, where the game ID is equal to 22. The game ID is equal to 22 just by pure coincidence. So I'm going to put a where clause in there, where game ID is equal to 22. That limits my changes to only one game. And now it'll accept that. And if I look at all the games again, it's been changed. And again, the trick here, you can go ahead and correct my spelling on that one too. Just hit enter, and then what was it, apply? And you see update, that it's actually giving full SQL here. My database name dot game, there's the table, set name equal to Madden 22, where game ID is equal to 21. It's just making, these things right here, if you can't see them, they're backticks. Those are not single quotes. Those are backticks. If you look at your keyboard, the tilde, the thing below the tilde is a backtick, right? So let me go ahead and apply this, and I'll show you what I mean here. Close. If you need to escape things, you can use backticks everywhere. If, for example, my table name was a reserve name, I wanted, for some reason, to name a table update table, right? Don't do that, first of all, because it's stupid. But if you absolutely needed to do that, you would escape things using the backticks here. And you see that it's in red now, right? But I'm not going to do that. Right? You can update as many times as you want. Even though it's not making any changes anymore, it's perfectly fine. 0 rows affected, though, because you're not actually making any. It was already Madden 22. Okay? Did I correct all my spellings? Okay. That shows how much I know about EA Sports games. Let me go ahead and put that in the notes here. So the original version that we did here was without a where clause, right? This update would change every game record. Right? It is not possible in safe mode. Right? Safe mode is your friend. Don't turn it off. Right? Update the particular game with the given game ID. Right? Oops. There we go. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put those into the notes there. Uh-oh. Oh, sorry. Update data. Update. SQL. There we go. All right. Good. Uh-oh. EA Sports lost its license. All Madden games have been canceled. So let's go ahead and get rid of them all. Right? So I'm going to delete them. Delete from game. Destroy. This is the D and CRUD. Destroy. What do you do? You think that's? Do you think that's safe? Did I specify which games I wanted to delete? Again, safe mode is saving me from myself. Delete from game would end up deleting every single record. Right? This would delete every single game record. Right? It would not delete the table itself. Right? If you want to delete a table, you drop a table. Right? And I'll show you how to do that later when we actually create tables. But delete is only deleting records, not tables, right? Not possible in safe mode, thankfully. Right? It's saving you from yourself. Any question? We do have a question online, sorry. Assignment 2 grading, grading is released every Thursday. Do we have to download some kind of software for SQL? Other than the MySQL workbench that I've already showed you, no. If you want your own server on your own computer, that's your business via getting that set up, but we're not going to provide any support for something like that. Otherwise, you're going to exclusively use the CSE server. Okay. So how do we actually delete a game here? All right. Delete a game, a single game, by providing an ID, a game ID. Delete from game, and what was it again? Oh, 20 and 21, right? That's convenient. Where game ID is equal to 22. Delete from game, and it was successful. You see the little green thing down at the bottom. Delete, where also Madden 21 gets deleted. What if I try to delete it twice? It's fine, but 0 rows affected. It didn't do anything. Deleting something that doesn't exist, okay, fine, I'll do that for you, right? It's going to be a no operation. It's not an error, okay? Update data and finally destroy, oops, there we go. Destroying data. All right. That was just a rumor. Madden 21 and 22 are still back on, right? So, conveniently, would there be an undelete? Right? Nope. You can see right here. It's not a keyword. There's no such thing. So, the recycle bin that you see on your computers, Windows is now what? Is it like the trash bin or something in Windows?
It's also recycling.
It's now a recycling bin. It used to be a trash bin. Recycling is way better. That is a thing for human users. Right? Humans make mistakes. And so they have undelete, where you can quarantine the files into a recycle bin, and only when you take active efforts to empty the recycling bin is it gone forever. You can always go back in and undelete it. You can always go to a backup and bring it back up. No such thing. Right? Unless you are doing extra steps to take a snapshot of a database to restore it at a later date, deleting it, it's done. Updating it, that's it, right? It's not going to save you from yourself. There is no undelete. But I would like to show you a trick here. Let's go ahead and insert those back in, right? Insert into game. I didn't, oh, by the way, did I delete the publisher? Select everything from publisher. EA Sports. No, I didn't. It's still there. Why? What did I do? I deleted the 2 children that EA Sports was, those 2 children were referring back to its parent. I just took those 2 children out. If I had deleted that parent, then I would have made these 2 children orphans, and that's not possible. Right? I'll show you that here in a second. So I didn't delete the publisher. It still has publisher ID 14. Let's go ahead and restore those 2 records. Insert into game. What is it? Name, publisher ID, values, Madden 21 and 14, and then copy, oops, that's not what I want, copy pasta Madden 22. Right. Lots of copy pasta there, right? I could instead do the following. You can insert multiple records with one query. By doing values, and I'm just going to go to the next line here and put that in there, comma, put that in there, done, and do I have to, I think that's it. Right? I don't think, you might have to put in additional parentheses, but I don't think so. Let's go ahead and find out. Hey, what does it say down there? 2 records affected, 2 duplicates, or a number of duplicates 0, number of warnings 0. Right? So I was able to insert both of those records with one query. Select everything from game. oh, sorry, select star from game. There we go. And you can see Madden 21 and 22 are now restored. Okay. So insert multiple records with one query. I'll make sure that you've got that in the C, the create, and where are we? Create, there we go. So there's a trick that you can use. In general, tricks are for kids, but you can go ahead and use that one. Let's see. Oh yeah, the other thing I wanted to show you. What if I want to delete from publisher, where publisher ID is equal to 14? So I'm going to delete EA Sports from existence. Right? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? That's a good thing. Okay. Then you don't get any Madden games anymore. Oh, okay. All right. I don't know who would be a good successor of that, but like the 2K series were great, right? Okay. Whoever did that, was that EA? Oh, okay. It's a company named 2K. All right. I just remember doing the NBA 2K games. Anyway, delete from publisher. Let's go ahead and grant everybody their wish and eliminate EA Sports from existence. And it's not going to. Cannot delete or update a parent row. Foreign key constraint fails. Remember, we've still got two games, Madden 21 and 22, referring to that parent. If we were able to delete that parent, we would orphan these two children. And that's not going to, the database is not going to allow that. Consequently, if I've got data that references other data, I have to delete it in a certain order, just like I had to create it in a certain order. The parent has to exist before I create children, and just opposite, the children have to be deleted before I can delete the parent. So there is that hierarchical relationship there. A game can exist without a platform. A platform can exist without a game. To bring them together, I would put in a record into the availability table, and once that record is there, I could not delete a game because I've got a child record referencing it. Right? Remember these chicken feet tick marks. That's the child. That is the referencing table. This is the reference table. The foreign key is always in the child. It refers always back to its parent. Right? So if I drew these in hierarchical, then we've got the grandparent, publisher, game, the parent, and then availability down here. We've got 3 generations if you want to look at it that way. Okay? All right. Nested queries, update, and destroy. Okay. So we'll go ahead and make some style notes, some observations here before we move on. Oops. Update data, observations. All right. Comments are usually denoted with a hyphen, right? That is 2 hyphens. Any other questions online? Not yet? Okay. Table names are generally, actually, I didn't do it with this. I should have updated this example. But the way that I did it over here is lower camel casing. So it doesn't really matter, but as long as you're consistent about it. Be consistent on table names and column name conventions. Right? And we'll talk about this again when we actually start making our own databases. But here's my suggestion for a modern suggestion. Table names are upper camel cased and not plural. And column names are lower camel case. Right. Why is that my suggestion? What else has a table, or what else has, say, Java? What else is upper camel cased and not pluralized, and you don't pluralize them? Classes. What has lower camel cased? variables, right? There is a nice one-to-one relationship between a class and a table, and then a variable inside that class and a column inside that table. If you follow the same naming conventions, then there's no guesswork at all, right? And this is why I say that this is a modern naming convention. You'll see old school naming conventions that use underscore casing, that use all upper casing, stuff like that. All of those other alternatives are fine as long as you're consistent about it. I suggest against them because all of them require you to kill your pinky finger. If you ever want to do underscores, that means that you are holding down the shift button with your pinky finger a lot. If you are doing capitalizations, that means you're holding down the shift button a lot to get all those capitalizations. Save your pinky finger, right? I don't know how many years I've got left until arthritis starts kicking in. Hopefully it doesn't, but certainly I have no idea if if you save your pinky finger that it staves off arthritis or not, but whatever. Save your pinky finger in case it does. All right, what else? In old school SQL, keywords are all caps. All caps, right? Caps, there we go. Right. You can use this convention, but why? So what I mean by that is, here's an old school way of doing this delete. Delete from where? So again, what am I doing? I'm killing my pinky finger all over the place. Think back to 1970 when Edgar Codd was doing this. They did not have colored monitors, right? I mean, they had a colored monitor. There was one color, green screens, right? And so to offset a keyword, usually they use this uppercasing convention and made everything uppercase. And it was visually, yes, you can definitely see that this is a keyword and that this is not a keyword. This is a table name or this is a column name, right? We don't live in 1970 anymore, right? You can see from my IDE here, color, right? Color conventions and coloring of keywords has the same exact effect, and it has the benefit of saving your pinky. Right? So if you're at a command line, sure, okay, go ahead and use, or if you're in, say, your Java code later on, go ahead and use this uppercasing convention here. But otherwise, keywords are case insensitive, right, in SQL. SQL keywords are case insensitive, right? The old school way assumed a monochrome monitor, right? We no longer live in that world. Everybody has code markup, color code markup. So you don't have to do that anymore. And that's why I'm not doing it at all, right? What other observations can we make? Style, lowercase. In general, white space generally does not matter. You can go to the next line and break up long queries. Each one of these is a query. We call them it's a question to the database. It's a query to the database. You can break up long lines to make it more readable. Right? If you do, then you generally want to align everything that you with using indentation. If you do align things using proper indentation, you don't want to be all over the place. Okay. What else? Oh yeah, you can use either double quotes or single quotes to denote strings, but be consistent. Right? Every query ends with a semicolon, just like C. Right? And I don't know why it's everything is that'd be a good history research to look into. there's a semicolon at the end of every executable statement because it acts like a period. But why didn't we just use a period? Probably because somebody grabbed the period for other purposes, the dot operator, the indirect component selection operator, or something like that, and that meant that you couldn't use the period for something else. So, okay, well, what's the next best thing? A semicolon, right? Because that ends a clause in language. Right? Maybe that's it, right? We call these things where clauses. This where over here, this is a clause. And so sometimes in grammar, you end a clause with semicolon. Sometimes, right? Not all the time. Maybe. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Okay. All right. Well, we've got about 5 minutes left here, or 5-10 minutes left. So I will just briefly introduce the select statement. So retrieving data. Right. You can pull data out of a database using the select statement, like we already just did, to pull every single record and every single column value. You can use a wildcard. Right? So SQL, just like we did before, select everything from publisher. Select everything from game. Right? That star, that's the wildcard. I want everything. Right? What if you only wanted, say, the titles? Right? What if you only wanted the names of the publishers because you didn't care about the publisher IDs? You only cared about the names of the games and the names of the publishers. You can modify this, the wildcard, that is. You can specify only a subset of columns to retrieve using the following. Select name from publisher. Right? Select name, comma, or let's say game ID. No, let's say name and publisher ID from game. Right? And let's look at the results of those two things. Let me go ahead and get rid of this. I'm still using my database here. Select the name from the publisher, and you see that I only get back one column. Right? I don't get back both of those columns. If I select the name, comma, publisher ID from game, then I only get two of those columns, the game name and the publisher ID. Of course, you can specify as few columns as you want. You can specify non-existent columns, but of course it'll error out. Unknown column foo in field list. Right? So let me go ahead and restore that. And again, white space is your friend. Sometimes people like to put everything on distinct lines, and so here's the style for doing that. And sometimes they actually go back on their indentation for when a new keyword starts, and they go overboard and do stuff like this. I don't find that readable at all. Right? So that's readable. Right? There's only two columns here. That's the most readable. Right? So, but if you do have a long line, think about breaking it up. I typically would do something like this. Keep everything at the same indentation level. If you've got a long list like this, then put the list on one line and don't worry about it. But of course, your mileage may vary. You might prefer a different style. The key thing is stay consistent. Okay? This is what I would typically do. The problem is, what I want is a report or a list that looks something like my original CSV file. I want a title along with its publisher. We'll forget about the year and stuff for now. And I'm not going to get that from two separate tables. Right? I've got a publisher table over here and a game table. I can query this one, I can query this one, but how do I bring them together? Right? How do I join them together? There is a join keyword, right? So that's where we'll end. You can join two or more tables together using a join query. Right? Did the wildcard draw influence from Unix? Probably. Or Unix Unix probably drew it from SQL. I think Unix came after 1970. When was Unix born? You look that up. I have no idea. But star is actually, It might all go all the way back to clean, because that's called the clean star, and it's from mathematics. Actually, everything comes from mathematics. So the clean star is used in regular expressions, and the star is used to match one or more instances of it. So this is the star is basically dot star gives you everything, and that's treated as a wild card. So it's probably from math, right? And regular expressions. Any other questions? No? All right, then that's where we'll continue it next time. You'll have more than enough by the end of Tuesday next week to do Lab 7 next week. But of course, if you want to work ahead, you watch those pre-prepared videos because I do go through a lot of these exercises. I think maybe with a game database, or maybe with like a film database or something like that. All right. Have a good weekend.